it's set up so that those least proximate and least visionary are in charge of visioning. So, you know, therein lies the rub, right?
You hear the snaps?
I heard that.
This is a time of transition in America. For those of us working in city building and community development, this is a moment to be daring, to dream big and speak the future we want into being. Our cities have talent and ideas. That's not the issue. The question is whether we will listen. We invited some great minds across cities to hear what they're thinking about their own work in this moment and how they're building what comes next. I am so excited to be in conversation today with Angelique Power, President and CEO of the Skillman Foundation here in Detroit. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago by a white Jewish mother who was a Chicago public school teacher and an African-American father who rose to be sergeant in the Chicago police force, Angelique has an intense passion for catalyzing new ways of critical thinking about racial equity and social justice. Prior to the Skillman Foundation, Angelique was president of the Chicago-based Field Foundation. During her tenure, she designed a journey with a staff board and nonprofit partners to center racial justice, changing how it funds and who it funds, created accountability structures for community to review its work. Wow. Okay, think about that. Rethought metrics, created heat maps that illustrate the design of inequity within Chicago, and updated its investment policy under Angelique's leadership. The Field Foundation doubled the size of its giving and its programming, including adding new streams of funding for individuals and for-profit media organizations. Angelique co-founded Enrich Chicago, dedicated to anti-racism organizing, and helped to found Just Action, a collaborative of 200+ organizations and individuals focused on helping institutions activate their 2020 racial equity statements. Additionally, she led a COVID mapping project with over 20 foundations, community partners, and nonprofits with an interactive planning tool to aid in systems change to solve for racial disparities found in the pandemic. Angelique also co-conceptualized the nation's first collaborative community workspace dedicated to social impact entitled the Impact House. She chairs the board of 6018 North and sits on the board of the Julian Grace Foundation. Angelique has an MFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Michigan. Welcome to the Consulate, Angelique.
Thank you.
That is a mouthful right there.
Okay, so that actually wasn't embarrassing.
It
That was amazing.
Really?
And I feel like I want to wake up every morning and just hear your voice, like telling my story.
Hear my voice tell your story?
Yes, that'll be my alarm.
I love an intro, right? I want to make sure, because let me tell you something, right? I don't think we do that enough. Travian Shorters from BB calls it the modest Negro syndrome. Like we be a little too modest in the impact that we are having in cities.
This is how we're starting our conversation, okay? Yes, that's right.
So don't be modest and take it.
No, I mean, Angelique sounds amazing.
Well, that's you. That's you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I love being here with you. I love being in the Cochrane House. This is such a gorgeous space. And there are people all around us who I'm interested in meeting soon after we're done talking.
I know, that's been fun. Like in the pre-production, it's so funny. She's been trying to get, you've been trying to get from this seat to meet folks. Yeah. I think that is amazing. Like we have a president and CEO of a foundation, one of our foremost foundations here, largest foundations in the city of Detroit, who ain't waiting for people to walk up to her like you're ready to go, walk up and meet folks. Where does that come from?
I mean, realistically, I know that I'm lucky to be in this city. I know that people who have come out, this is an evening, this is a Wednesday night, took time out of their busy schedules to come listen to us talk. You know, it's an honor to have everyone in this room, and I want to meet people. That's how I'm going to learn how to do my job, is actually through conversations with the people around me.
I love it. South side of Chicago.
South side.
A white Jewish mama.
Yep.
A black father. How does that happen? How does Angelique get here?
I always say, like, I don't have a sad biracial story, because you hear sad biracial stories all the time.
Yeah.
But on the south side of Chicago, There is a land that's called Hyde Park, and it's a really interesting sociology experiment where it is the University of Chicago, it is primarily, in terms of ethnicity, a Jewish community, and in terms of race, a Black community. So if you are going to be Black and Jewish, grow up in Hyde Park. Our temple is across the street from Barack Obama's house.
Oh, wow.
And so actually when Barack was a senator and then later when he decided to run.
You said Barack. Like, are y'all friends?
Barry.
Like, you know him?
Yeah, no, but we all, don't we all say Barack? Don't we all say?
I'm a bit more deferential, but go ahead. I say President Obama.
You do?
I do.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's okay. I thought y'all were friends when you said Barack the way that you did, but it's all good.
We've met a couple times.
Okay, so you know him.
No.
Yes, you do.
I do not know you. I want to know you.
Listen, I met the president, and I'm going to say I know him for the rest of my life.
You are?
Yes.
Okay.
I know Barack Obama. We talked. We shook hands.
Yes. I do have a Barack Obama story that's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Do you want to hear
it?
it? So there's a place in Hyde Park called Valois. Has anyone been to Chicago, South Side, Valois? Valois is a restaurant. It's called See Your Food Cafe. So you go up, you order, and by the time you get to the end of this little line, they've made your food right in front of you. And then you sit down, and the rule is that you sit with anybody. And so you have all different types of people sitting together. And in fact, somebody wrote a dissertation on it called Slim's Table. And it is about race and economics and how people interact or forced interaction creates connection. So I'm sitting at Valois. It's the day after Halloween. I'm with my girls. I've got devil ears on because that's basically me just coming out, on Halloween as who I actually am.
That's hard to believe. Angelique Angel.
It's a ruse.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there, I'm having breakfast, and all of a sudden it gets like really quiet in Valois. And we're like, what's going on? And we see Secret Service sweep the place. And we're like, oh my God, is it Barack Obama? Is he here? Is he here? And then like our then governor walked in, Pat Quinn, and everyone was like, wah, wah, like who cares, And he like kind of walked around, and I think he must have worked it out that he got to come first because ain't nobody care about him,
right.
So then next thing you know, it's like all the cars pull up and Barack Obama walks into Valois, and I'm wearing devil ears.
Oh my God, did you take them off?
No, I forgot.
You forgot?
You look at Barack and you're just like,
oh my God,
and I like shook his hand. He came to me first. We had a whole conversation.
Really?
And the White House photographer took a picture of me in devil ears talking to Barack Obama. I have it framed in my office.
That's what I call, and what Lauren Hood would call, black audacity.
That is audacity.
That's audacity.
That's right.
But this social experiment in the South Side of Chicago. So you like you said, you don't have a sob story or a feeling othered story. It was really
I have a feeling othered story,
okay.
But, I think growing up, so in this biracial family, what I will say is that Hyde Park had a lot of biracial families. And not just Black and Jewish, but also Black and Asian and Black and Latinx. And so it was more the norm. Now, I am still the brown child in a temple. I'm still the light-skinned kid who sounds white, in like the basketball game and in backyard barbecues. So I grew up feeling a part of communities and apart from communities at the same time.
That duality is something.
Duality is deep.
Yeah.
But it is not a trauma. It is a gift.
Say more.
So the reason that I even do the work that I do is because I know that I have a passport to move into different cultures, that I can translate ideas to different cultures. That is a huge responsibility. I also know that I have privilege, that I am in the position that I'm in because I have light skin, because I sound white. I am not confused by this. This is an individual achievement. And so that's a responsibility. So what are you going to do with this privilege?
Okay, all right. She dropped the mic already. Like, where does this come from? Where does this love for community and city building come from? Your mom is a teacher, your dad was on the force. Did they instill
this passion? Where did you get it?
Well, I'm the product of very vibrant dinner table conversations. Judaism for me is activism. Mm-hmm. So, and that is a part, and there's, Jews are not monolithic, blacks are not monolithic. The type of Judaism that I was raised with is activism, is social justice. And so part of our discussion was about how you could be, even in this south side of Chicago, which is a carefully designed, constructed space that through redlining and different things was constructed for black people. Mm-hmm. Teachers and police officers often are dealing with all of the byproducts of systemic racism and systemic inequity, and they are blamed because they haven't solved these systemic issues. So my parents taught us to study everything, not just like what you learn in a classroom, but to study the context and the subtext and the unsaid, the chess game, who's making decisions, what does the budget look like? That's just what we were raised with, this sort of responsibility to study the world around us, to make sense of it. And so that's a part of it. I think the desire to create just and equitable communities came later in my life. I think in the beginning, I was just trying to figure myself out and figure out like all the things that make me weird and different and learn how to love those things, which is a lifelong thing that I'm still working on. But at some point in working different jobs, and I worked in the private sector, and I worked at the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector, and I actually think it was after losing both of my parents, I was working at a nonprofit. I was like working my ass off. Can I say that? Are we allowed to say? So I was, because nonprofit work is working your ass off.
Yes, I'm tired. I'm legit tired.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's because that's the structure of nonprofit. Like you work overtime, the grind.
The grind.
And you're on the fumes of a mission. But you are underpaid and you are overworked and and underappreciated.
Yeah.
And I was working my ass off, and I literally one day I like stopped and looked in the mirror and I said to myself, work is not your parent. It's not going to love you. It's not going to take care of you. It's not going to validate you. And so if you're seeking those types of things, it's not going to come from a job.
Wow.
And this is after losing my parents and realizing that that's what I was like trying to get from where I spend most of my waking hours.
Yeah.
And so instead I decided to become a stakeholder in the mission of what an organization says it wants to do. Mm-hmm. And then I connect my soul with my role of where I am every day. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing that can make sense to me. And that organization has to be a stakeholder in me too. And if it's not, then that is not the right place to work.
Wow. Are you operating in your calling in building just and equitable cities? Are you called to this?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all called to something. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I said to you before the camera started rolling that there's moments that I have fear about the work that I do. There's moments that I worry, like, is my key card going to work today when I show up?
Did the board give me the pink slip?
Exactly. Like, is this how I find out? Like,
Dang, that would be cutthroat.
But if I don't feel that way, then I don't think that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Talk about carrying this fear as a person of color, especially in the position that you are in. And I look at black women and, the resilience and the strength of the black woman has almost become a trope. It is a trope to a certain extent of, the black woman having to show up strong and to carry the weight of her family and the weight of the world and the weight of this American democracy on,
right?
Can we talk about that?
Yes.
On their backs, and they don't show up fearful. They don't show up scared, right? Mm. And so I think by you naming that, you just gave sight to so many women of color who are doing this hard work, this scary work, but doing it scared?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that it's a constant mitigation as a Black woman, because you're in a space and you're a strong Black woman, but you can't be too strong. Mm-hmm. You can't be angry about what you're doing. You can't be insistent on something, because then you're combative. Mm-hmm. And so as a Black woman running an organization, first of all, I walked into it like, do I know how to do this? Like, do I know how to run a foundation? Do I know how to manage investments and manage a team? And you know, for years I'd been sort of studying anti-racism work, and I had co-founded Enrich Chicago at that point. But it's different to, when you run the show, to actually, you know, put your money where your mouth is and run an internal culture differently, run investments differently, deal with the board differently. All of it is suddenly very, like, real. And it's not, I mean, imposter syndrome is overused, but so there's one fear, which is like, what if I'm bad at this? What if I'm not smart enough to do this? And like, everybody finds out, like, oh, she's actually not smart enough to do this. Then the next part is that once you get in there and you can see that, like, actually that anti-racism work we've been doing is the work here, is the strategy here. And you think, uh-oh, they hired me as a strategist. And then when I step forward and I'm like, okay, so we need to study racism, and we need to look at ourselves.
As a foundation.
And we need to look at everything that we do and understand how complicit we are in creating the problems that we claim we want to solve.
Okay, you saying it.
Right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, the fear is that people are gonna, one, be like, I think that she's just putting her personal proclivities forward. That's not strategy. That's just her, like, taking care of herself, when it's like the ultimate strategy, right? And the other part is that people are gonna just say crazy stuff, you know? And the elegant resistance that comes out from people who are supposed comrades with you to actually changing the work is what you confront in the beginning of any kind of change. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of fear at Field. I also think you have 6 months to start a revolution. And so when you get to a new place, like, you gotta go. You gotta go, 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 go. And then sometimes, you know, you get there and massive changes happen. And I think people are kind of nodding, and some might be like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, I have no idea. And then it's too late, because, like, some things have happened and things started to change, or people get into it. Mm-hmm. And they start to realize, like, oh, this anti-racism work is actually liberating work for all of us. Mm-hmm. This allows us all to function differently and show up differently. And that is what happened at Field, and that's what's happening at Skillman.
When did you take the reins at Field in Chicago?
In 2016, in August 2016.
Do we even know the word anti-racism at the time?
No, and it was very scary to use the word anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice. All of that was, you know, we were more comfortable in diversity and inclusion world then.
Yeah, we love that. We love those words.
Yeah.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And actually, the very first time that I did a racial justice training of the full board and staff was a month after the presidential election. Whew. And I wasn't sure how the board had voted.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going somewhere with this. How big was the endowment at Field Foundation?
$65 million.
$65 million is a significant amount of money. We're talking about entering into a leadership role at a foundation which is part of, you know, the American institution, right? These foundations, from how they're funded to how they're created to even the people who created them, and the role that they played probably in assisting and aiding and abetting in oppression of marginalized communities, right? Played, right? And so for me, I think it is powerful for a leader to come in and talk about not only the role of this specific foundation and the culpability of said oppression, but to be external in naming it and saying, we're going to do something completely different as an entity that holds a purse of $65 million.
Yeah.
How was that received?
Well, so what's interesting is that $65 million to me is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But in the foundation space, it's nothing.
Okay.
And so you've got MacArthur, you've got the Chicago Community Trust, you've got all these family foundations that have way more money. So in many ways, I was like floating along beneath the radar, you know, saying all kinds of things. People were like, what? You know, but then it was really about action. So when we started to change things, I think what was interesting is there was a little bit of interest and relief, because inside of whether it's other foundations or nonprofits or corporations, there are warriors inside of those spaces trying to create change. They've been bumping their head against all kinds of stuff for a long period of time. And so even just like newsletters that I would write and send out about our examination, our fallibility, like what we're trying to figure out, it relieved them of some of the things that they were trying to like fight on their own. They could hold up something and say like, well, look at what Field Foundation is talking about and doing. Yeah. And that's part of growing the staff and the grant making, is that other organizations started approaching us. MacArthur came to us and said, we want you to give our money away. Ford gave us money to give away. Chicago Community Trust, Democracy Fund. We were a private, independent foundation. We did not raise money. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we were receiving other people's funds to give them away because we were doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Talk about the crazy stuff. So like in the intro, we talked about how you sort of flipped the model of funding at the foundation, funding individuals. Oh, that's so scary. So fun. Imagine being an individual in Chicago and the foundation writes you a check and say, hey, we like your work, keep doing it. And it's a check to you,
yes.
Not an organization, not an entity.
Well, okay. So let me explain the way that program was created.
Okay.
I think this mantle of leadership is often bestowed on people who run an organization, people who are in recognized larger nonprofits, mm-hmm. or people who sit in traditional seats of power. Mm-hmm. But power is all over.
I believe so.
And when people really want to get something done, they go to people all over in different neighborhoods. So this program, what I really wanted to do was actually recognize power as power. Not like the known or whatever, but the organizer who is a coordinator mm-hmm. inside of a nonprofit. The person who's a solo actor mm-hmm. working on things, who works in a collective or a cooperative.
The resident who's been there 50 years.
Who've been there 50 years and who no one has said boo, right? And so we focused on community organizers and journalists, storytellers, which we were like people who did podcasts or documentaries, fact-based storytelling. And we ran up on them. That's how I like to describe it. Run up on people. And we would give them $50,000. $25,000 was for them. And then $25,000 was for their organization.
First off, pay yourself.
Right.
Angelique Power, come on now.
Pay yourself, but we know you, and we know that if we just gave you money, you're going to give it to
You're going to give it away, yeah. You're going to give it,
And so we got that. They got theirs. Now pay yourself. And we had to make it clear that it was like, literally, in giving the money, we're like, do whatever the hell you want. That's literally what I had to say.
You have to like convince the practitioner.
The hell
do what you want with the money.
Like, take a vacation, you want to take, like, buy a car, health insurance, like whatever you want.
That is not the structure of community development practice and work that I came up in. It's much like what you described, like this culture of overworking yourself and beating your head in the ground and, you know, taking pennies for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, a foundation and foundations have incentivized that complex for years.
Yes.
And so for a foundation president to change a culture in such a way that a foundation is rolling up on me. Like, you found me, you think my work is dope, I'm gonna give you a check to continue to work. But what we really want you to do too is make sure that you compensate yourself.
Yes, that you take care of yourself. And actually, the metrics of the program were, if we do our job right, and if we earn enough trust, then people will decide to tell us what they did actually do with the money. But that's it.
No line on grant reports. Like, we gonna say, this is what happened for real.
Right.
Like, this is what happened.
But I will tell you, to get to the point where this program was launched, there was a lot of conversation, which was like, well, yes, perhaps the money should go toward a class where they receive the money, but they have to have executive leadership.
They have to build their capacity. Because were you giving this money to black people and brown folks? Yep.
Yes. Oh, all black folks.
Yeah. So they need capacity building first.
So we need to, and then they need to be educated here. So that, and then in 5 years, we should look to see if the capacity of their organization has grown because of it. And I was like, well, no, I don't think they'll be there in 5 years. And in fact, I don't care if they stay at their organization or not. We're investing in them because we're investing in justice.
And justice is risky.
Well,
why is the sector so risk averse?
Honestly, I think it's because there's so much need and there's finite resources. And so there's a desire to justify where dollars go and where they don't go. And I'm not just being kind. I really do think that it's like good intentions to say, like, well, we don't have a lot of money, and so we invested it in the place that will have the most impact. Impact. You hear that word a lot.
Can you talk about impact versus intent?
Yeah. We cannot control impact on anything. The variable of any successful venture is if you've built trust. And if you impose your idea of impact on someone else, you have ruined trust. And then you don't get to hear the real story of what happened. You have forced someone to create fiction to make you feel better about yourself.
And your annual report for when it's time to write it. I want to sit in this conversation for a couple more minutes about risk, because for me, it seems like risk and capacity is forced on practitioners of color, right? Who are doing impactful work, right? Who may not be a part. We're seeing a pipeline of leadership in the city of Detroit who are not necessarily trying to work for a nonprofit, who aren't trying to work, the traditional route, to make change, but they're just sort of doing it on their own terms.
Yes.
And the work sometimes is on shoestring budgets. Yes. And they get the audience of foundations, they get the audience of program officers, and it's too risky.
Yeah.
Is that something that is unique to practitioners of color doing community work, doing city building work? In
some ways. I mean, social impact does not organize itself as a 501c3. So that structure is inherently racist, and I'll explain. So the reason that nonprofits were set up was to be able to affect change, but also was reliant on having access to high net worth individuals that could serve on your board and then
influence the work. Yeah.
So it's set up so that those least proximate and least visionary are in charge of visioning. So, therein lies the rub, right?
You hear the snaps? And that goes back to the intent and impact question that I asked, because if those folks who are making the decisions about the strategic direction of a funding organization and where the money goes, but have absolutely no bridge to the neighborhood or the people that this funding is supposed to impact, how can we make, real decisions and real change?
Well, so that's why I think, this is the problem with philanthropy in general. When you are shepherding capital, it is hard to trust the one who is doling out these resources. It is an untrustworthy profession. And so, and there's a lot of questions. I have a question about if racial equity and racial justice in philanthropy is an oxymoron or not. Is it ever really achievable if it's an elite group of people making decisions on behalf of others? I don't know.
And even the language we use to describe staff, officers. And it's very militaristic.
Yes. Yeah. Compliance focused. So at Field, which is a different organization than Skillman, but at Field, and this goes back to intent, the main metrics of anything, of the foundation's impact, were two things. One, have we built trust? And two, and we talked about this before, have we protected communities from ourselves?
I love that.
Yeah.
Philanthropy should protect the community from itself.
100%.
How did you arrive to that? How did you get there? And how were you able to put that sentence together, those words?
I don't really know, except that I was born on the south side of Chicago. And I am in this role not because I, like I said, have earned my way here. I am riding in on a wave of privilege, and I understand the assignment, like TikTok. I understand the assignment.
Let's talk about Skillman Foundation.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I am absolutely in love with the work that you did in Chicago, but I cannot wait to hear about the work that you are doing and plan to do at Skillman Foundation. Skillman being at the forefront of children in our city and their education in our city, and whoever is in the executive seat at Skillman is looked to as a thought leader in that space. So you are a few months into the job.
Yeah, like a little over 60 days.
How's it going?
Great, it's all figured out.
Yeah, you got it. We could end the conversation here.
Good. Yeah.
What are you learning?
So much. I mean, I'll say on the front end, like, Detroit is unique and is different than any other place on the planet, which is part of the reason that I'm here. This is a Black city.
Yes, it is.
This is a young city. This is a vibrant city that
average age, what, 35?
34. And I would say a city that is, in some ways, practiced in being in a fight for its soul.
Whew. Can we just let that breathe? Because we had to.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been in dress rehearsal for years.
Yes, but it is not the struggle that defines Detroiters. It is the stepping to. It is the rising up. It is the hustle harder. That is actually what defines a Detroiter.
And that's why you wanted to become one.
I ran here. I ran here. There's also another component that I was running toward, and this was during the pandemic. I, love Chicago. I am a Chicagoan through and through. I'm not trying to pretend I'm a Detroiter. Y'all wouldn't let me pretend that anyway. But when I started watching the uprisings that were happening all over the place, these were uprisings that were led by young people, by Black young people, by Black and brown young people that don't conform to any sort of binary. They have different expectations of this world. And they are not in favor of incrementalism. They want wholesale
Right now. Come on now.
systems change. And I was watching this thinking, I'm going to do everything in my power to just move everything aside so that they can create the world that we need. And it gave me hope. So that's why I'm here.
Wow. Okay. So I remember we had the opportunity to interview you on my podcast, Authentically Detroit, where I co-host with Donna Givens Davison. And you may have been like maybe 4 days on the job.
4 days,
We
yeah.
interviewed you at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Which was a trip.
Why was it a trip? Tell me why you thought it was a trip.
Okay, so I move to the city.
Yeah.
And then I start a job. And then 4 days later,
You shoot off to this
I
island.
shoot off to an island with horses
Okay.
and buggies. I don't know what your association with horses and buggies are, but for
You
me,
know mine.
right? I
Yeah.
was like, what is happening here? And then the Grand Hotel is like hearkening back to a time that I don't want to hearken back to.
With a lie.
And I got there a day early because it's been the pandemic. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't been traveling, I haven't gone to a conference. No one is in masks, like no one. Old people are dressed to the nines, like waiting in line to go to a restaurant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I kept flashing to Get Out, like the whole time. Like, I was just like, I don't know. I went back to the
ain't
room,
real.
I called my husband, I was like, I don't know.
I think I made a mistake.
You know?
Yeah, it's an interesting place. But on the Media Row, we had an opportunity to talk to you about your plans and the listening tour that you were getting ready to embark upon. And, I asked the question about the culpability of, foundation and adverse outcomes in our neighborhoods, right? Because there's something to be said about that, right? But I didn't specifically name Skillman's role, right? And for anybody who knows my co-host, Donna Givens-Davison, you know that she gonna say it, right? So this new CEO, 4 days on the job, Donna says, well, let's talk about Skillman. And Skillman has done X, Y, and Z in the community, and she sort of talked about what you were just talking about, why it's so hard for people to trust foundation professionals, particularly Skillman, with its history and some of the decisions that they made back in the, whatever. So she brought it up and she laid it bare, right? Yeah. What was your reaction to that?
I was like, finally, real talk. Like, that is what I expect of Detroiters, to come correct. I need to come correct. And that, obviously you have talked with me. I am not, new to the idea that philanthropy has caused harm. I also know that the power associated with being in this role, whether it's like inside even of my own organization or outside, I liken it to the Truman Show,
You on display.
Right. You walk in and the play begins and people are so happy to see you and they tell you, these things that are not real. And so she trusted me enough to bring it to me with real talk, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, it was a moment.
You didn't appreciate it.
Well, I was just like, I was just of the mindset, dang, let the lady get in first. But she's just 4 days in. But that's why our show works, because Donna and I are so very different and sometimes have opposing views. Much love to Donna Givens-Davison if she is watching this. But you also said something that I don't hear a lot of president CEOs of foundations say. You said, and I remember this vividly, let me get smarter about the more descriptive things that you are talking about, because she read a list of things, right? But on behalf of the Skillman Foundation, I apologize. We ain't never heard no apology from, you know what I'm saying, from an actor in these systems of power. And I knew right then, is like, I got to get her on the Consulate. Like, we got to figure out, how to talk, because that was a powerful moment.
Yeah. And it's genuine. It's genuine. And it's the least I can do is say, I'm sorry. Harm has been done. And I'm sorry. And that's not, that's not the end. That's just the beginning of trying to repair. And so that's a lot of what I think about. And and I would love to talk about Skillman, because Skillman plays a really critical role in the city. There is not one foundation that doesn't need to say many times, I'm sorry. And so there's nothing weak about that. I think that's powerful and beautiful to be able to do that. And then also, help me get smarter. Let's do this together.
Thank you for that invitation. I accept. Yeah. Let's talk about the reparative work. Let's talk about repair.
Yeah.
What's Skillman? What are y'all up to?
Well, so a big part of what we're doing, one, I'm doing a listening tour, which I signed myself up for a year. And, you know, in some ways it's just one-on-ones. It's talking to different people who I need to know and who are doing great work around. A lot of it is with young people, which is like the coolest part of my job, is to be able to sit with young people. We have a President's Youth Council, actually. Jeremiah is here from the President's Youth Council. And so not only have they been giving me counsel, there's more to it than that. But I'm going to save that to the end for the cliffhanger. Okay?
Okay.
So the listening tour is part of it. And that's where I'm trying to actually create space where I can be told the truth. And part of the listening tour is asking.
It's so hard for people to tell president CEOs of foundations the truth because, you know, the thought in the back of our minds is, at the end of this conversation, I still need a check.
I'm a dollar sign. I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. But if I am asking, like, what can Skillman do better? Mm-hmm. Like, where should we double down? Where can we change? What can philanthropy do differently? What do you need in this moment? What does Detroit need in this moment? It opens up a huge conversation. And I'll tell you, some of these are one-on-ones and some of these are curated group conversations. I sat with a group of principals the day after the Oxford High School shooting.
Yeah.
Last night, I sat with teachers. These conversations are changing me. Like, they are arriving right on time. We're creating a space, I don't know, probably because I have program staff that have wonderful reputations with different folks. Mm-hmm. And so they're in the room helping to curate like very real talk. But, you know, some of these sessions are like healing sessions, are grief sessions that we are in collectively. So there's a set of questions we're asking, but we are collaboratively healing, learning, and unpacking things together that I think we all leave changed a little bit. So a listening session, I mean, that's what we're calling it. But it's just a beautiful way to get to know the city. That's one thing. The other thing is I've rolled out like a 7-step plan, and it'll happen over the next 8 months. Are you interested in knowing that?
Of course.
Okay. So the first thing that we're doing is a racial equity audit. What that means is every penny that we spend, we need to report to community where it's going. Not just in grants. Mm-hmm. Grants are the little bit that sticks out, but in the endowment, mm-hmm. in the operating budget. And so that's something that we will be doing regularly so that you can check us and tell us where we need. We are in Detroit.
That's right.
We need to tell you where every penny is going.
Okay.
Okay. Next step is racial justice comprehension. So we're in a moment right now, we talked about 2016, scary to say anti-racism, scary to say racial equity, racial justice. It's not anymore. It's like, can I have a racial justice latte? You know, like, it's like all over the place. Yeah. So, but people don't know what it means, and they don't know how to operationalize what it looks like. And so that's why the racial equity statements, you know, it's easy to make a statement.
Oh yeah, some very performative. Yeah.
Yes. So with our trustees and with our staff, we really looked at how racial equity is moving money and shifting power in systems, and how racial justice is funding in communities of color to build power to change systems. Mm. And so we're studying that, and we're looking at everything we're doing to see where are we doing racial equity, where are we doing racial justice, and where are we not. The third thing is systems change, and I put that in the same pot of like, we need systems change, we're calling for systems change, but I don't think people know what they're talking about.
I want to read a quote as it relates to that you said. This is powerful to support what you are getting ready to say, I think. Here's what we can no longer do and what we must do. We can no longer dance around the exquisite design of racism in our systems and institutions. The old tropes pitting small town against city, white folks against people of color, don't hold water. But people bathe in them anyway. Anti-racism work liberates every human to live in dignity and abundance. New liberating systems where we are all connected in each other's fate and invested in each other's successes must be our collective focus. You said we can no longer only try to patch a broken system. We must patch and architect anew simultaneously.
That's right.
Girl.
That's right. So let's look at the school system in Detroit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Under repeated emergency management, there's real trauma there. You know, teachers last night said they need to heal. They still need to heal from emergency management. So, and Ash is on my program team in the audience, and she was saying to me in an investment review, you know, the systems are fragile in Detroit. Like, they are being built. And so when we're talking about Skillman's role over the last 60 years, and really with the focus on schools, a big part of what Skillman does is focus on these nationally recognized mile markers, like third grade reading. If you're not reading by third grade, they can literally create the amount of prison beds they will build.
Yeah, the pipeline.
So, and every job that you might be able to get, you have to be able to read, right?
Absolutely.
So Skillman will come in and scaffold with literacy specialists. How do we tutor? How do we help? How do we do everything we can to get third grade reading levels up? Out of school time, after school time, it is proven that if you have a place to go outside of school, then you can be nourished, you can be inspired, you could do your homework, you could be fed, you could think about college or career in a different way. Let's fund. Out of school, after school, let's scaffold. Meaningful high school graduation. Unless you have a high school degree, a lot of these jobs in this bifurcating economy are disappearing.
Yeah.
So let's work on that. Let's get a career pathway, let's get a college pathway. So let's do everything we can to get mainly Black and brown children through a terribly broken system. And then when we get to the end, let's start again and keep going. That's not enough. That's not enough. And it's not the mighty that have gotten through it. There's a million factors that go into those that survive it. And so we have to continue to do this, because that's justice work too. This is life or death work, right?
Yes.
But we have to change the system completely. Teachers have to be paid twice, three times as much as they're paid. The standardized tests make no sense. What are they standardized to? The pedagogy that's not based in cultural relevancy, not having Black teachers and brown teachers in our classrooms, principals who are overwhelmed and don't have time or space, the infrastructure of our spaces, the funding formula that is so inequitable. We have to change all of it.
All of it. And I would add the punitive practices that land our young people in the carceral system.
There is so much trauma right now. And if we don't center behavioral health and behavioral wellness, then it multiplies. And so absolutely, first of all, just on a basic level, this punitive approach to Black and brown kids is real. That's the school to prison pipeline. That's why we want officers out of schools. That's why, you know, suspensions and expulsions are through the roof. That is something that has to be addressed and changed. So point blank, and you know, this story of a 9-year-old in custody because of a threat. You know, the other thing I'll say is that young people are hip to this. Like, they watch the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. They know that someone can like walk around and actually kill people and not actually be charged. So this idea of threatening to do harm can send you to jail is not lost on young people. They're reading the tea leaves of what that means. And that's on us. That's our responsibility. So when I was talking to the teachers last night, there were some that were saying, when I asked, like, what is racial justice and racial equity to them? How does it show up? First of all, one of them said, you can walk into any school, and before you see a child, you could tell the race of the majority of those students just by looking at the resources that are there or the resources that are not there. And the other thing that a teacher said, which I thought was really interesting, was that she has to fight against often other teachers who have subsumed this punitive stance, you know, over wearing a hoodie, over, these small infractions.
You're getting suspended because you have a hoodie on.
Yes. So not only is it, the prosecutor, it's the prosecutor that has become internalized inside of us. And that's what we have to really work on.
You were talking about the 7 elements that you are putting in place. You were on number 4.
Okay, thank you. Systems change. So we're studying systems change. Steeped in racial equity and racial justice. What does that look like in the education system? How do we understand federal, state, regional, local, and the intersection of other systems that impact a kid in a classroom? So that's work that we're doing. Youth power. So, I've talked about Jeremiah, I've talked about young people. Like, Detroit is filled with these visionaries that we did this research this summer at Skillman where we asked Detroit young people, Black and brown young people, 14 to 18, 2 years into this pandemic, how are you doing? How do you feel? What are your perceptions of the future? How do you think they felt?
Isolated.
And I miss my friends. A few of the main takeaways that we got from these interviews were also the feeling that young people can talk much more readily and comprehensively about mental health in a way that grown-ups need
That's
to.
what they were saying. Yeah. Basically, yeah.
And so they were putting it front and center, saying not okay, need some help here, and continually need help for the things that are going on. That's a lesson that we can take for them. The thing that I love about this research that we did was that the majority of young people, when we asked about their view of the future, they felt hopeful, they felt powerful, they felt agency, and it didn't correlate necessarily with are you going to college next year? It's because young people own their power and their agency, and it is unlocked from institutions that they don't believe in. That is amazing.
Youth power.
Youth power. So what does that mean for a foundation? How do we invest directly in that?
That's amazing. What's funny is, the podcast that grilled you when you first came is also a recipient of that youth power funding, where we're going to, help young folks build a stage for themselves, a speaker box, if you will, for themselves to talk about the things that they want to talk about via the podcast medium. Y'all are already getting started.
They're ready.
I know they are. I'm excited. Yeah.
So that's, and then other pieces are our role outside of grant making. Foundations give money away, and that's a portion of what we do, maybe 20% of what we do. But we're in the influence business. There's no neutrality here. And so we are invited to sit at different tables. People pick up the phone when we call them. What do we do with that? And who's directing that? It shouldn't be us. It should be those most proximate and most visionary to those issues. So if we aren't kicking down doors, bringing others to the table, setting new tables, carrying messages, amplifying it, then we're not making use of the majority of why we're in philanthropy.
I love that.
There's that, and then there's sharing power, and I put internal culture in there, I put metrics in there, who gets to create metrics. I put relationship building and partnerships, and then the final one is accountability. So our bosses are Detroit's children and youth. So they need to tell us if we're doing our job right all the time. They are the ones who we are in service to.
I love it. There's this question that I like to ask about dreams as we wind down the conversation. I think it's revolutionary to ask Black people what they're dreaming about, because sometimes the reality of the present is so harsh that it inhibits us from even talking or even thinking about the future. As you are steeped in racial equity work, as you are steeped in being an activist for our young people and providing a platform and stage for them to express their own power, what are you dreaming?
I've had this year in my head of 2035. And it just like came to me maybe a month ago. And a part of it is that everyone is so focused on 2030. You know, that is when demographically there'll be so many shifts. You know, there's the Compact 2030, or they're focused on 2040. I've been reading about a lot of the companies in Detroit who are making these big plans for 2030, investing billions in electric vehicles and smart grid, all with these big plans. 2035 is 14 years away. So think of the youngest person that you love.
Okay.
How old will they be in 14 years?
About that age.
Exactly. So for me, that's Coda, who's 15, and Braxton, who's 19, and my daughter, Sadie, who's 25. What is Detroit for them in just 14 years? And so this is how, often in racial equity and racial justice work, we stay at dismantle. That's like step one. But we don't talk about the utopic liberatory future that we're heading toward.
Okay.
And so I think in 14 years, we need to have a view of where we're going, and we need to know along the way if we are getting there.
The dystopic utopian future.
Well, it's you know, Lauren Hood is here in the audience. We've talked about the Black Thriving Index. How do we not focus on deficits of what we don't have, but actually focus on where we're going and what we need to have? How does every neighborhood in Detroit look in 2035? Is it abundant? Is there small businesses and musicians and artists and gardens? Are there, you know, self-driving cars as public transportation taking us to like apprenticeships and after-school programs? And, you know, what does it look like to have a thriving Detroit in every neighborhood? And how do we get there?
Yeah, we will. I love the language that you're using, and it's not language that we hear from philanthropy a lot, right? We hear a lot of deficit-based framing, but everything that you have been talking about, especially when talking about the people that is supposed to be impacted by this social justice work, this racial equity work, has started from a place of abundance, recognizing their power, recognizing their experience, and making sure and incentivizing them to keep going, keep the work going, pay yourself. We see you, young person. We want to give you a stage. Youth Council, tell the president of the Skillman Foundation what she doing right and what she doing wrong.
And do more than that.
And do more than that. Wow. Okay. What is at stake if the status quo remains in place?
You know, the status quo is a spiral downward. And I think that that should be apparent to us at this point. Not only when you think about climate change, that if you maintain the status quo, you'll see, you know, we just came off these terrible tornadoes across the Midwest. There's horrible weather that's heading to the Twin Cities tonight. Like, the status quo, staying, and it's a metaphor, staying exactly as we are right now is a fast slide downward through different systems all over. And so it is not an option unless we want to see this continuing bifurcation that's happening in our society. So we have no choice but to work really hard on saving everyone that we can who's in these broken systems while trying to do something different. And we're gonna mess it up. Like, we don't know what a liberated education system looks like.
Thank you for that, because thank you for the permission to make the mistake and for the permission to be messy, because this is going to be messy. It's not going to be super prescribed.
And in fact, it has to be messy.
Yeah.
If it's not messy, we aren't doing this.
Yeah. What gives you hope?
I mean, young people give me hope. They are, like I said, brilliant. You know, the humor, like, I think of an ampersand when I think of this generation. They are pushing, and I think we have to acknowledge that Bell Hooks passed away today.
Absolutely.
and that she was a professor for the world about intersectionality, about race and class and gender, and how they all mix. Young people are growing up in this world.
Personifying that.
Personifying
Yes.
it. And so we have all of these professors, you know, that are bell hook stream, that are all around us in Detroit.
Our young people are our professors.
Yeah.
They are our teachers. That's what gives you hope. Angelique, this conversation has been beautiful and soul enriching, and sitting across from you, hearing your heart, hearing the values that you espouse, hearing you name the privilege that you have, and leveraging that to make palpable change for folks who don't have that same privilege is absolutely inspiring. Thank you for saying yes to do this interview.
Thank you for creating this space everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, you create this space for other people to just show up fully. That's a gift.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. All right, y'all clap it up. Our thanks to Angelique Power for this amazing conversation. We want to thank our guest tonight, and thank you to the Cochrane House for hosting us. We want you to stay tuned for our next conversation made possible by the Ford Foundation. We will see you next time on Urban Consulate Confidential.